Okay, thank you so much for the organization, for this amazing event, and for inviting me, and also you all for being here. So I'm talking, and I'm very grateful for Alex's talk, because it really helps us to go into one specific topic, which is the labeling for AI/ML-based medical devices. And it is actually, I have done a lot of work thinking about this, and just, I do a lot on all kind of like legal issues raised by AI, but this is one of the topics which I have thought a lot, that we do need some labeling standards for AI. And I will mainly talk about a recent paper of mine, which was just published in the Emory Law Journal. It's over 90 pages long, so I try my best to tunnel it down and tell you a little bit about it and what I have thought here. What's my central argument? Well, my central argument is that regulators like the FDA really can learn very valuable lessons from food labeling for the development of urgently needed labeling standards for AI/ML-based medical devices. So why is it even important that the FDA develops labeling standards for AI? Well, the FDA has already permitted marketing of over 1,200 AI/ML-based medical devices. The majority of such devices are in radiology and followed by cardiology and also neurology. Now, I was informed that not every one of you have deep knowledge in medical device law, so I try my best to give you a brief overview so that you can all follow what I'm saying here. So first of all, we need to understand what a medical device is. Why is it so important? Well, it's important because the FDA can only regulate medical devices. So if your tool does not fall under the medical device definition, FDA cannot regulate it, even if FDA wants to. And so that's why it's very important to understand what a medical device is. Well, this is a definition here on this slide, what a medical device is. So it's defined under section 201H1 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and in particular here the parts that I highlighted in bold are important. So a medical device is intended for use in the diagnosis of disease or other conditions, or in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease, and does not achieve its primary intended purposes through chemical action within or on the body of man, in which it's not dependent upon being metabolized for the achievement of its primary intended purposes. And in particular, the last sentence is essential for AI, because it says here that the term device does not include software functions that are excluded pursuant to section 520(0). Okay, so what does that mean? Well, what is section 520(0)? Well, in section 520(0), there are 5 categories of software functions that are mentioned, and all of these, so if your tool falls under one of these exceptions, well, then it's not considered a medical device, and this means it's not subject to FDA regulation. So what type of software function do fall under this exception? Well, software functions that are intended for administrative support of healthcare facilities, maintenance or encouragement of healthy lifestyles. Many health apps fall under this exception. Serve as electronic patient records, transfer, store, convert formats or display data and results, and then clinical decision support software tools. Now, in particular, the last one here is relevant, and also the second one, as I mentioned, because a lot of health apps fall under that exception. But in particular, the last one, the clinical decision support software exception is important here. So the law says that any software function that is intended for, and this is a quote, the purpose of supporting or providing recommendations to a healthcare professional and enabling such healthcare professional to independently review the basis for such recommendations that such software presents fall under this exception. Of course, you can imagine it's a very complicated and pretty opaque what this means here, independently review the basis for such recommendations. It opens up many possibilities for interpretation. FDA also released, of course, guidance documents around it, what FDA thinks falls under this exception. definition, but of course AI companies trying hard not to fall under the medical device definition, claiming that their tool is a clinical decision support software tool. Now, despite all of these exceptions, there are still, of course, AI/ML-based products that are classified as medical devices. And in general, the term medical device also includes software functions. Now, we have 3 different types of software functions. There is a so-called software as a medical device, or SAMD. There's software in a medical device called SIMD. And then there's also software used in the maintenance or manufacture of a medical device. Now, in particular here, the first 2 ones are relevant for AI, SAMD and SIMD. So what is SAMD? Well, SAMD is defined by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, the IMDF, and the IMDF defines SAMD as software intended to be used for 1 or more medical purposes that perform these purposes without being part of a hardware medical device. So what does this mean? Well, it just means SAMD is standalone software, and the software itself is considered the medical device. And so SAMD is usually operated by non-medical devices like laptops, smartwatches, smartphones, etc. Now, for SIMD software in a medical device, we do have both software and hardware components. So it's software embedded in a medical device. And so the software needs to help the function of the medical device in some way. So imagine, for example, a software that helps run an insulin pump. But the majority of AI/ML-based medical devices that are currently being developed and available on the US market are SAMD, so software as a medical device. Now, if a health AI-based product is a medical device, it will be categorized into one of 3 classes, class 1, class 2, or class 3, and that's based on its risk. So you have low, moderate, or high risk. And there are 3 relevant types of pre-market submissions. There is a so-called 510K, and that's for class 1 or class 2 devices, unless they are exempt. There is the so-called de novo classification request. That's for novel low to moderate risk devices. And there is a pre-market approval, which is for class 3 devices. Now, what's important to realize is that the majority right now of all AI/ML-based medical devices, right now, the data that we have, it's 96% of all tools that went through FDA went through the 510K. Why is this important to realize? Well, it's important because for the 510K, you only need to demonstrate that your medical device is substantially equivalent to another legally marketed device. And that's a so-called predicate. And usually a 510K typically also does not require any clinical evidence. Now, here are just 2 examples of AI/ML-based medical devices that have already received marketing authorization by the FDA. So the left one is Brainomix 360 Triage ICH. So that's a device that received 510K clearance in July 2023 and is intended to alert clinicians on their smartphones of suspected brain bleeds. And then, of course, there are also AI/ML-based medical devices that are directly addressed to consumers, like Apple's ECG app. And both of these tools here, they are software as a medical device, so SAMD. Alex mentioned the IDXDR tool for diabetic retinopathy. So that's, for example, a tool which is special because it's considered autonomous because there is a non-expert using the tool, so no human supervision. And second, because it went through, is one of the rare occasions who actually went, if I'm going back here, through the de novo pathway rather than through the 510K. And that means you need to show some more clinical type studies. Now, I want to talk here about labeling. And so we need to understand what I mean by labeling. Well, again, of course, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act actually defines the term, and it's all labels and other written, printed, or graphic matter upon any article or any of its containers or wrappers or accompanying such articles. So what does this mean then? Well, it's really a big, broad umbrella term here that includes all types of labels. And as mentioned, most AI ML-based medical devices are actually SAMD, so it's just software. It doesn't have a physical form, so the label is going to be in a non-physical form through the software itself. So why is it then important that we do need some labeling standards here for AI ML-based medical devices? Well, there are at least three main reasons here. So first of all, AI ML-based medical devices differ in many aspects from traditional medical devices, such as contact lenses. So for example, as Alex talked about also a little, you know, some AI ML-based medical devices are opaque, so-called black boxes, and they can be adaptive, they can continuously learn from new data, and also the more human-AI interaction takes place, the more difficult it is to predict how an AI ML-based medical device will perform in the real world once launched on the market. And then, of course, Alex showed us the Obermeyer study, right? AI is prone to bias, and there are different types of biases, from training data bias to label choice bias, contextual bias, unconscious bias. And the second reason is that the current medical device labeling requirements that we have are insufficient to ensure the safe and effective use of AI ML-based medical devices. So in total, there are 6 parts of Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations that actually contains labeling requirements for medical devices. And in particular, the first one here, the general device labeling, that is in Part 801, is an example of so-called general controls. So it applies to all types of medical devices, including AI-based ones. But the problem is that Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations does not contain specific labeling requirements specifically tailored to AI ML-based medical devices. And this is pretty concerning because, as mentioned, AI ML-based medical devices do differ in many aspects from traditional medical devices such as contact lenses. So for example, a study early on conducted actually by stud reporter Casey Ross showed that that out of a total of 161 legally marketed AI ML-based medical devices in the US, only 7 provided publicly available race ethnicity information, and only 13 disclosed gender information. And in addition, most manufacturers also did not report information on the amount of data used to validate the device's performance or the geographic breakdown. And this is just one of the examples that shows and confirms that the current labeling requirements for medical devices in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulation are insufficient. And the problem again is, without proper labeling standards for AI, many users are going to be left in the dark about a lot of important information, such as gender, race, ethnicity, and also geographic breakdowns of the data sets used. And of course, without that information, patients' health may be jeopardized by unnecessary treatments or also biased care. Now, what's the third point? Why we need some labeling standards? Well, labeling has also advantages because, of course, first of all, it creates transparency, which is really important to promote user trust in the device. Also, proper labeling for AI ML-based medical devices, including providing users with information such as race, ethnicity, gender, age, or geographic breakdowns of the data sets used, really may prevent harm to patients by enabling them to properly assess the device's benefits and risks, and also to make autonomous decisions whether and when and how to use it. And then, of course, lastly, labeling for AI ML-based medical devices also creates legal clarity for manufacturers. So what are then the lessons learned and suggestions? Now, in this paper here, I'm arguing that that we can really learn very valuable lessons from food labeling for the labeling for AI ML-based medical devices. And I established in my paper that there are actually 4 key components of modern food labeling, and that these key components can be transferred, at least as an overall structure, to the labeling of AI/ML-based medical devices. And so how does this look like? Well, a comprehensive framework for the labeling of AI/ML-based medical devices would consist of the following. So first of all, nutrition facts labels, which we know from food products, called here AI facts labels. Then an FOP nutrition labeling system called here FOP AI labeling system. The use of modern technologies like apps, and then also additional labeling such as instructions for use. Now, I want to go into those different components to talk a little bit more about them. So the first one here, the key component of food labeling, as everyone knows, is a nutrition facts label. Now, nutrition facts labels are typically displayed on the back or the side of the package or container. They do have served the goal of helping consumers make smarter decisions about what to eat and drink, including pushing food companies to produce healthier products. Now, how does this look like for AI/ML-based medical devices? Well, the idea would be to introduce what I call an AI facts label that serves a similar purpose as a nutrition facts label to provide the primary addressee of the label, which could be either the healthcare provider, the healthcare professional, or the consumer, with relevant information about the AI/ML. And this information can enable them to make really an informed decision about whether to use the device, and if so, how to properly use it. In my paper, I draw 9 lessons here from the nutrition facts label for packaged food and drinks that could be helpful for the FDA to consider when developing an AI facts label. I don't have the time to talk through all of these points, but I want to point out at least one of them, which is the content of the AI facts label. So, of course, the FDA needs to figure out the content of such an AI facts label. And in my previous work, I have already suggested 11 key types of information that should be included on the label of all AI/ML-based medical devices. Of course, this list here should not be considered exhaustive. It should really rather serve here as a starting point for the FDA to finally start the overdue development of labeling standards for AI/ML-based medical devices. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, again, I don't have time to go through all the details here, but as I explained earlier, users really do need to get information on the data sets. Imagine if the physician doesn't have that information. That's problematic. If the physician doesn't know how this model was being trained in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, and geographic breakdown. Also, I propose in my new paper the development of 2 AI facts labels, one for healthcare providers and one for consumers, depending on the primary addressee of the label. Now, healthcare providers will typically use an AI/ML-based medical device as trained professionals, while consumers, of course, will typically use the device as lay persons. And so the needs of both groups here for information about the device will likely slightly differ in terms of content, depth, and also language. So, for example, I could imagine that consumers will likely need less specific information about the validation and performance results, but may care more deeply about other things like limitations, model limitations and warnings, and the risk associated with false positives and negatives, or the adequate protection of their privacy. Now, as I established in my paper, a front of package, a so-called FOP labeling system, is also an essential component of modern food labeling. Now, as the name already indicates here, the FOP nutrition label is typically on the front of the package of food and beverages, directly visible to consumers. Now, in particular, there are 2 types of FOP labeling systems, the so-called summary indicator system and the nutrient-specific system. So just to give you a couple of examples. So Sweden's keyhole symbol, the Nutri-Score used in France and other European countries, and also the Health Star rating system, which exists in Australia and New Zealand. These are all examples of so-called summary indicator systems. So what do they have in common? These systems usually consist of a single symbol, icon, or score that provides summary information about a product's nutrient content. And examples of a nutrient-specific system, which is typically displayed, displays information about select nutrients from the nutrition facts label on the front of the food package, includes, for example, the UK traffic light system or Chile's FOP warning labels. Now, of course, if you go today to the supermarket and want to buy something, our products here in the US don't have anything on the front, right? So we are not there yet that we have implemented such an FOP nutrition labeling system, but the US and so the US has yet to implement such a system, but the FDA proposed actually in January, still under the Biden administration, a nutrition info box, and it seems likely right now that the Trump administration is actually going to finalize the proposed rule, because it seems to be at least been promising, because they recently extended the comment period for the proposed rule until July 15. And so the FDA, in addition to the nutrition info box, has also worked on a FDA healthy symbol to complement the FOP labeling system. So maybe at some point in the future, we are actually having an FOP nutrition labeling system also here in the US. Now, how does this look like for AI now? Well, for AI/ML-based medical devices, I suggest the introduction of an FOP AI labeling system. So the article is really here the first to connect FOP nutrition labeling system with their promise for AI/ML. Now, in my paper, I derived 10 lessons from food labeling that regulators like the FDA could consider when developing and implementing such a system. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I want to point out a few important things. So first of all, I argue that a government-created, uniform, standardized FOP AI labeling system that complements the AI facts label should be developed and implemented. Now, such a system would likely be particularly beneficial for consumers, who are lay users and may have difficulty reading and also understanding the AI facts label. Now, having an additional FOP AI label whose design is simple and provides really at-a-glance information about the AI/ML-based medical device can really help consumers' literacy. And an additional FOP AI label also can help consumers quickly understand important information about the device in question and also make better informed decisions about its use. But the FOP AI label could not just potentially be useful to consumers, it might also be really helpful for healthcare professionals who are very busy in their medical practice, and that's especially true in emergencies where decisions must be made instantly. The FOP AI label also could help healthcare professionals scan important information quickly, nudging them to closely read the AI facts label or instructions for use where necessary, and also enabling them to decide whether and to what extent the AI should be used in patients' care. Of course, regulators really need to determine here the exact primary purpose of such a system and whether it would make sense to adopt a summary indicator system or a nutrient-specific system, which I call here the AI facts label specific information system. So, for example, if the primary purpose here is for consumers and healthcare professionals to quickly understand the present overall risk level associated with using this AI tool, a summary indicator system is the ideal option. But alternatively, if the main idea of such a system would be to emphasize select information that are on the AI facts label, then an AI facts label specific information system would be the ideal option. So you could imagine, for example, an FOP AI warning label. Now, there's also the option to combine the FOPAI labeling system with a trustworthy AI symbol, which could be seen as kind of like a certification mark individuals can rely on. And then, of course, we can learn other things from food labeling here too, which is using modern technologies like apps or online tools to enhance users' literacy. So good examples include Yucca. Who knows Yucca? Does anyone use it? Well, more people need to use Yucca, and I'm not being paid by Yucca. But it claims to be a 100% independent project that assesses the quality of food. Now, a consumer just needs to download the app, it's for free, and you can just scan the barcode of any food product, and then the app scores the product from 0 to 100, including categorizing whether the score is bad, poor, good, or excellent. And the Yucca app is actually based on the Nutri-Score system in Europe, but it also considers additives to make the decision, and also the organic nature of the product. Now, there are also other examples. Italy has its own app, and the Nutri-Informed Battery app. So that's just another example based on the system they are using. And then, of course, we do have other things too. There's, for example, an online tool which is called True Food that helps consumers select less processed foods in supermarkets. Yeah, inspired by all of these examples, similar technology, right, could be developed for AI/ML-based medical devices. Of course, such apps or online tools would need to be user-friendly. They would need to be transparent about the method they use, and also could be made available either through a federal agency like the FDA or an independent third party. Lastly, additional labeling. Now, there's always additional labeling we need to think about too. So in the context of food, additional labeling are things like the name of the product, its ingredients, leaflets, manuals, etc. So for AI/ML-based medical devices, I discuss 3 main components in my paper. Instructions for use, fact sheets for patients, and also labeling for AI/ML-generated content. So, for example, granular details of the device should go into the instructions for use. Second, fact sheets for patients. Well, the additional use of fact sheets for patients actually could be very useful for AI/ML-based medical devices, at least for the higher risk ones that are used by healthcare providers and healthcare professionals, because the label is primarily addressed to the healthcare professionals and not to the patient. Lastly, what's important currently with, of course, with generative AI, if an output is AI generated, it will be important to disclose this information. And this disclosure requirement will be particularly significant when the FDA starts to authorize generative AI tools and large language models in the future. I'm going to stop here and thank you for your attention. Look forward to any questions.
Hello, very interesting, very fascinating stuff. I just wanted to know, why model with food labeling as opposed to drug labeling for this?
Yeah, the reason why I used food labeling is because there has been a trend over the last couple of years that a lot of people embraced at least the model cards or nutrition facts label as an idea for AI. We have also seen that that some regulators, like the ONC, actually have embraced the nutrition facts label. So the ONC is responsible for AI algorithms that are being used in the medical record, and they have just started to require labeling requirements, and they are not requiring the format of the kind of nutrition facts label, but there needs to be key information in it. FDA hasn't done anything at this point yet, but the entire idea was, okay, if everyone is embracing food labels, we should actually understand what we can learn from food labeling, while just saying, oh, we are just doing it in this way without even understanding what we can learn from it.
Thank you for the talk. I guess, in my practice at home, I have a lot of patients that come to see me that I don't think they read food labels,
right.
to be perfectly frank. So I guess my question is, number one, is there any data to show the efficacy of food labels changing consumer behavior? Like, what's that look like? And then what do you think that translates to with
right.
AI, ML tools and devices?
Yeah, so I think that's why it's going to be important that we are actually connecting the nutrition facts label with an FOP-AI labeling system, because of the issue that there are people who do not read nutrition facts labels, and that's a known fact, and also have difficulties reading it. It's complicated. And so far, the only suggestions regulators have made, and also in the community, stakeholder community, is we need something similar to the nutrition facts label. But my paper goes one step further to say, no, we actually need two things. We need the nutrition facts label and an FOP-AI labeling system for promoting consumer literacy, because not everyone is going to understand or is going to read that label. And so either you decide, okay, we need to go like the Schiele model, which is, well, we have warning labels. And the data which we are seeing is that these, at least in the food industry, is really, if you're combining it with an FOP labeling system, whether that's a summary indicator system or nutrient-specific one, that it does help people better understand and make better food choices, even indirectly, and just seeing it directly on the front, whether that's the warning label or just like A, B, C, D, how good the product is. And so I think to really have a success that we are reaching everyone, not just the educated people who want to read the label, we do need to have more than just an AI facts label.
I think the fact sheets for the patients are really going to be useful, and I think I'm pulling from the EUAs with the FDA and COVID testing and all of that, and I think it's going to be tied to states actually promulgating laws to require consent for use of AI in care. That's going across. The specific question, we had this issue with laboratory developed tests. Where do you put the label?
Yeah, so of course I didn't have time to go through that, and I'm talking about this in the paper. We need to do some empirical studies what the best way is. Of course, because most of it is SAMD, so it's just the software. So you could either, when you're opening it, that it's directly being shown each time you're opening it, the label, literally, before you even get into the program. But I also clearly say we will need to test it, because you need to make sure that it's not going to be like a click, click, click issue, right? And so no one takes it, no one looks at it any longer. So that's really something which needs to be studied. What's the best, where the best place is that it's been, and again, this tells me this issue that we need to combine it with an FOP-AI labeling system, because I believe if there is a warning label in addition, which has been shown, even if you don't read it, you indirectly might notice it, in contrast to the label, which you might just not even read and just click. And so I think that combination could be very powerful to also prevent those issues from happening.
I understand you discuss a more very general idea, but for the things what I'm more interested about is the clinical treatment in hospital and in medicine development. Like in these two cases, who first, where you will show the labeling, second, who will check the labeling?
Yeah. I mean, this label would be for AML-based medical devices, right? So you would need to go through FDA, whether that's a 510K clearance, a de novo, or PMA, and usually the manufacturer would need to be responsible for putting the label properly, right? Again, that's why it's important that FDA develops some type of standards, because right now we already have 1,200 that went through FDA, and they are just using the normal label requirements for traditional medical devices that don't require any of this. There has not been any disclosures been done so far on any breakdowns, and also what Alex mentioned, this the study in hospitals that often they are just being tested in one clinical site. That's an issue. That information needs to go somewhere and needs to be known, right? Otherwise, at the end of the day, it's all going down, of course, the problem of validation and who has the resources to revalidate the tools. Of course, only like higher income hospitals, and so then we are literally just increasing disparities in health rather than trying to reach everyone with that technology.
Most of the food products as well as the medicine, they have the expiration date. How it is going to relate with the AI devices in terms of their life cycle and whether to upgrade it or to discard it?
Yes, it's an excellent question, and of course I address it in my paper. So right now we don't have truly adaptive AI tools, at least not the ones which go through FDA. So they are usually locked algorithms. The FDA just allowed now that you can submit a so-called predetermined change control plan. So what it offers you is that changes you want to make to the algorithm, and you already know that you're going to make them, you can get an already now a review from the FDA and an okay through the first pre-market submission. So it's kind of like a hybrid model, but it's not truly yet the case that the AIs can just adapt constantly. That would be maybe in the future, right? We would need to have constant ongoing monitoring for those. But if you are changing something, you are going to need to update the label.
Thank you for the talk. So there's like the Coalition for Health AI, and for those who haven't heard of it, I think it's like over 3,000 people from different organizations that have come together and put together like a model card similar to the labels you're mentioning. So I guess for you, it seems like your appeal is to the FDA, maybe directly to the government to mandate these standards. I guess especially in like a deregulatory environment, do you see change towards nutrition labels for models being more led by organizations like demanding that standard to adopt the algorithm, or more from the government mandating standards for adoption?
So my ideal solution would be from a government-driven, because what we have seen also and learned from food labeling, if everyone can do it how they like and there are no standards even in the format, it's going to be difficult for healthcare providers and consumers to quickly, identify stuff. So if we have more standardization, that would be better. But again, a problem which we have in the US, at least in our regulatory framework, is that many AI tools are not going through FDA, right? And so my vision here is that it might have implications for all types of AI tools, not just the ones for medical devices. I was talking briefly about the trustworthy AI certification mark, because I do believe right now, in particular in the current climate, we might not see regulation, rather deregulation. And so then the question is, what can we do about it? Well, we do need to rely on stakeholders here, probably, helping to maybe navigate it. But again, having different, no standardization is problematic. The trustworthy AI tool with some type of assessment might potentially help in the future to identify, is this trustworthy or not? Because right now, it's not really clear, right? If you are using something, is it actually helpful or not? Was it properly being trained? It's hard to assess, in particular for direct-to-consumer tools.
Thank you so much for your talk. I just have a quick question about the software in medical device implementation. So, for example, like an insulin pump, for the consumer, they're given a lot of information and labeling about just how to use it and various warnings and things like that. So for you to have, like, let's say there was AI or ML being implemented into an insulin pump, for you to properly have an FOP AI label, would that precede all of these like trainings and warnings that the consumer needs to know? Or do you think it would be after all of that? Because there's kind of like, you know, these 2-3 hours at the beginning of using it that, excuse me, that you get all this information. So I'm kind of wondering where that would fall in this just kind of wall of info.
So you mean when it would be shown?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so again, I cannot give you a perfect answer for it, probably very at the beginning, right? But I think we need doing empirical studies on it. You know, what's like the most effective way to show this either to a consumer, right, or to the healthcare provider. Similarly, which type of FOP AI labeling system will be the most efficient one? Is it showing them warning labels, or is it to pull out specific information as a score, for example, right, as a summary indicator system, that might be more efficient to see. And then again, it depends on, is the primary addressee of the label the healthcare provider, or is it the patient, right? Because often people not necessarily know that if the healthcare provider is using the AI tool, the label is addressed to the healthcare provider, whose responsibility then is to educate the patient, right? That's then the informed consent questions, where there's also, we could do a much better job right now disclosing even the use of AI, right? And there's a lot of questions around when should we disclose that AI is being used. So it's really depending also on the primary addressee of the label, how the label is going to look like.